Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about spooky season book recommendations. All of these books fall into the dark academia, witchy vibes, dark fantasy, thriller type of genre. I love all of them, and at the end I'm also going to tell you some of the books that are on my spooky season TBR. So let's begin. First up, we have one of my favorite series of all time, Ninth House and Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. So good. It's set at Yale. It's dark academia with demons and witchy vibes and like spells and secret societies. I highly recommend it. There is a third part coming out which I cannot wait for. Highly recommend. Read this. Also by Leigh Bardugo. This is on my TBR. I only got this recently. It's The Familiar. It's also about kind of a witch that does like little spells or has like little gifts. It's also very dark and it's set in Spain's golden age, and there's also a person that somehow resembles death. So I think this would also make the perfect spooky season book. Next up we have a little cutesy witch series, The Ex-Hex, The Kiss Curse and The Wedding Wish and Wedding Witch. This is just like a fun little series. They're quite short. I read this one last year on Halloween and I want to read this one on Halloween this year. I think these are so fun. It's about two, I think, cousins and their aunt, or like the mom of one of them, and they have like their own little tiny witch coven basically in this little town that kind of resembles like Gilmore Girls, cozy vibes, and they go on like little quests, and it's just very fun, like very fun reads, but still perfect for the spooky season because obviously witches. The next couple of books are all gonna be witchy themed. First up, The Crimson Moth. So good. I read this recently. I enjoyed it so much. There is a second part coming out next year. I cannot wait. It's about a witch and a witch hunter, and nobody knows that she's a witch, or like witches are obviously hunted because he hunts them, and then they're like rivals, but there's also a little bit of romance, and it's also very tragic, but so fun. I love this very much. Next up we have The Witch of Portobello. This one's not really spooky, but it is about a witch, I think in Italy. It's been a while since I've read this book, but this is so good because it's basically gossip about a witch, but like dark gossip, and you get like all of these different perspectives from all of the people in like this tiny town. It's so interesting and I highly recommend this. Also perfect for spooky season, The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. Demons, witches, three girls that are kind of forced to be like a group of friends more or less. So dark, so good. I gave this I think 3 stars because it is a tiny bit slow for how short it is, but it's still really good, and I loved how dark it is and the type of witchcraft they do and how you have to basically give something up in order to do magic. So good. Let's move on to some dark academia vibes. I feel like these two go together. The Secret History and If We Were Villains. These obviously the covers give the same vibes. I read this one last year and I really liked it. I think it's a little bit similar to The Dead Poet Society, and apparently this one is also similar to Saltburn. I haven't watched Saltburn, but apparently it is a little bit similar. I really like this. It's very dark. It's also set in a university. It starts in fall, it goes into winter, things happen, it gets really twisted, really good. So highly recommend this one. And this one is recommended if you have read this, if you like the vibe that this gives off. I haven't read this actually, but it's on my fall TBR, and because it is kind of similar, I think I'm really gonna enjoy this. Also, I love this cover. It's so good. And then, because what would spooky season be without Stephen King, we have 2 Stephen King books. First up, Misery. This is set in the wintertime, but it's still so good and so scary, and this one actually had me like gripping the book because at the end it just gets so good and so like also frustrating and scary and twisted, and it gets like so dark so quickly, like you don't really notice it and suddenly it's like bad. So I highly recommend this. This actually might be my favorite Stephen King book. I also really liked Carrie. That would also be a great Halloween book. And then I also have The Shining, another obvious choice, I guess. I feel like I don't really have to say much about like what happens in this because everybody knows, or if you don't know yet, then read it without knowing anything about it. It's really good. Also very dark. It's a little bit of an older book. There also is a movie. I would recommend reading the book first and then watching the movie. I think there's actually also a movie on this one. I haven't watched that movie yet because I think that's a bit too scary for me because it's too real. This one feels a little bit less real. On another book by Stephen King I really like is The Mist. That actually might be my favorite. So my favorite Stephen King books either are The Mist or this one. And now let's get to the books that I haven't read yet. I have a couple that I want to read on Kindle, or I haven't gotten around to buying them yet. One, Hollow Heathens. I'm gonna read this one very soon. Nocticadia. Also very anticipated. I've heard good things. Number 23, Burlington Square, and then also Shades of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I think those would be really good as well. And then there's a couple of physical copies left. First up, we have 2 books by Alex E. Harrow, The 10,000 Doors of January and The Once and Future Witches. Obvious choice because witches. And then this one, the cover intrigued me at first. It's kind of hard to sum the story up quickly. It's basically about January, a girl, and she's like in a house and there's so many doors and books and something like spooky happens. I haven't read any books by Alex E. Harrow Tarot, but these two just were so interesting to me and I have a good feeling about them, so I think I'm gonna be reading a lot more of her books. And lastly, we have Christina Henry's The House That Horror Built. I also really want to read Good Girls Don't Die. That's in my bookish advent calendar for this year, so I can't read it in spooky season, but this one just intrigued me because it is set in Chicago and I'm going there in a couple of weeks, and it's obviously the house that horror built. What like, it's just sounds like the perfect Halloween book. It's also set in like a huge mansion in Chicago, as I've mentioned, and it just sounds really interesting and I just love books like this. So these are all of my spooky season book recommendations and books that I want to read personally in the upcoming months. Let me know if you have any specific book recommendations, because I love reading in the fall. It's just the perfect time for reading, and I also love spooky books and witchy books and demon books and dark books and all that type of stuff. If you've read any of these books, please let me know down below so we can talk about them. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope to see you in the next one.